I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. My name is Matt, and I've been married to Jessica for 5 years. We had what I thought was a solid relationship. Sure, we had our arguments, what couple doesn't? But we always managed to work through them. At least, that's what I believed until everything came crashing down. I first noticed something strange a few months ago. Jessica, who used to come home excited to share her day with me, started acting distant. She'd come home late from work and I'd shrug it off, thinking she was just swamped with deadlines. Then there were the little things. Her phone was glued to her hand, her texts were a flurry of activity, and she became oddly protective of her screen. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd give vague responses and change the subject. One evening, I decided to surprise her with dinner. I cooked her favorite meal, hoping to rekindle that spark. But as I set the table, I noticed her phone buzzing with a text. Curiosity got the better of me and I glanced at the screen. The name on the message was Jake, and the text was flirty, something about how he couldn't wait to see her again. My heart sank. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was probably harmless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I racked my brain, trying to think of who this Jake was. Was he a coworker, a friend? I needed to find out. Over the next few days, I became a detective. I watched her behavior closely. She'd take long showers, change her clothes several times before heading out, and there was this distinct perfume I didn't recognize. It was a perfume that didn't belong to her, I was sure of it. The breaking point came one rainy Tuesday. I was at home, scrolling through social media, when I saw a post that made my stomach drop. A picture of Jessica and Jake, arms wrapped around each other, laughing at some bar. The caption read, "Great night with my favorite person." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. At that moment, denial was no longer an option. I knew. I felt betrayed and enraged. I couldn't understand how she could do this to us. I went into the living room, packing back and forth, trying to gather my thoughts. I had to confront her. I needed answers. When she walked through the door later that evening, I could see it in her eyes. She knew something was off. I didn't waste any time. "Who is Jake?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage and hurt. She froze, the color draining from her face. "What do you mean?" she replied, feigning innocence. "Don't play games, Jess. I saw the photo. I know you're cheating on me." Her expression shifted quickly from shock to annoyance. "You've got it all wrong, Matt. It's not what you think. We were just hanging out, nothing serious." Her excuses came pouring out, full of lies, and it only fueled my anger further. "Hanging out? You're in a full-blown affair and you call it hanging out?" I was screaming now, but I couldn't help it. I felt betrayed, not just by her actions, but by the fact that she thought I was stupid enough to believe her lies. As we argued, I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was an assault on my very being. I thought I could trust her. The emotional impact was overwhelming. My heart raced, my palms were sweaty, and my mind was racing with disbelief. I had never imagined my life would take such a turn. The confrontation ended with her storming out, claiming she needed space, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I was left there, shattered, with a million questions swirling in my mind. How could she do this? How could I have been so blind? As I sat there, feeling the weight of betrayal suffocating me, I knew I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in my pain or figure out how to reclaim my life. This was only the beginning of my emotional journey, but I had no idea where it would lead me. I'm not sure what I expected. Maybe it was some form of clarity or closure, but all I felt was the void of uncertainty and rage. I had to make a decision about how to proceed, and it needed to be drastic. Little did I know that I had a transformation ahead of me that would change everything. After the confrontation with Jessica, I was left with a potent mix of anger and heartbreak. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying every moment of our relationship in my head. I felt like a fool, like I had been living in a lie, and the betrayal weighed heavily on my chest. The initial shock gave way to a deep-seated sadness that turned into a fierce resolve. I wasn't going to wallow in despair. I needed to take action. I decided to focus on myself. I started going to the gym every day. I hadn't paid attention to my physical health in a while, but now it felt like the right time to make a change. I pushed myself through workouts that left me drenched in sweat, pumping iron until my muscles burned. Each rep was cathartic, Each drop of sweat was a mini exorcism of the pain she caused me. As I transformed my body, I also began to rework my appearance. I had always had the same look: short brown hair, a scruffy beard, and a wardrobe that screamed comfortable. But with every passing day, I felt myself shedding the old Matt like a snake shedding its skin. I decided it was time to get a new haircut. It was a small but significant part of my transformation. I wanted to look and feel different, and that meant a trip to the barber, a place I used to go but hadn't stepped into for years, convinced it was just for men who took pride in their looks. As I walked into the barber shop, I was greeted by the familiar scent of aftershave and the faint sound of clippers buzzing. It felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. I introduced myself to a young barber named Kyle. He had a fresh, edgy look, something I envied. As he started to snip away at my hair, I couldn't help but share what had brought me there. "Man, you wouldn't believe it. I just found out my wife is cheating on me," I said, my voice a mix of bitterness and humor. Kyle didn't hesitate. "Sorry to hear that, dude. That sucks. But hey, you're here now. Let's give you a look that'll make her regret it." His words struck a chord. I hadn't thought about making her regret anything. I had been too consumed by my pain. But the idea of walking away from this situation, not just as a victim but as someone who took control, felt empowering. By the time Kyle finished, I barely recognized myself. My hair was short and stylish, my beard neatly trimmed. I looked sharp, like a man who had stepped off a magazine cover. I couldn't help but smile at my reflection. It was the first time in a long time I felt a spark of confidence. Leaving the barber shop, I felt lighter. The next step was to update my wardrobe. I ditched my old clothes and purchased outfits that made me feel good. I opted for fitted shirts, stylish jeans, and shoes that actually matched. With each new piece, I could feel the old Matt slipping away, replaced by someone who was ready to take on the world. As I walked down the street in my new gear, the compliments started pouring in. Friends and acquaintances I hadn't seen in a while noticed the change. "Wow, Matt, you look incredible," they said, and it felt good. It felt like they were acknowledging not just my appearance but my transformation from a heartbroken husband to a man who was reclaiming his life. But there was still a lingering darkness in my heart. No matter how good I looked on the outside, I couldn't erase the pain she had caused. I started thinking about revenge, not in a way that would harm her but in a way that would show her I was more than just the man she could walk all over. It was time to make her see that I was done being the version of myself she had discarded. I began plotting how to execute my plan. I needed to show her that I had moved on, without her. I wanted to make sure she never saw me the same way again. I didn't want this pain to define me. I wanted to redefine who I was. In my mind's eye, I pictured the scene, a confident, transformed version of myself showing up where she least expected. But before I could truly execute my plan, I needed to gather some intel. I had to know more about Jake. Who was he? What was it about him that had captured her attention? I found myself slipping into detective mode again, researching social media, mutual friends, anything that could give me insight into her affair and into the man who had stepped into my shoes. I reached out to a few mutual friends, casually asking if they knew anything about Jake. Most of them didn't, but one friend, Sam, who had always been close to Jessica, finally broke down. "Yeah, I know him. He's a personal trainer. I think they met at the gym." That stung. So, a trainer, someone who helped people get fit. I wondered if she was attracted to his lifestyle or his body. Suddenly, it clicked. She had started working out more, spending hours at the gym. Was that when the affair had begun? The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and I felt a surge of determination. I needed to move quickly. I had no intention of letting her see the old Matt ever again. I wanted to be the man who walks into a room and turns heads, not just for a new haircut, but for the confidence that radiated from within. Things were about to get interesting, and I was ready for whatever came next. The journey of revenge was just beginning. With each new day, my transformation became more than just skin deep. It was as if a switch had flipped inside me. I was no longer content to sit and wallow in the pain Jessica had caused me. I was ready to take action. I spent more time at the gym, pushing my limits, and I even started taking self-defense classes. I wanted to be stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. I was preparing for what was to come. My investigation into Jake deepened. I discovered from mutual friends that he'd been in the picture for a while, but no one knew the extent of their relationship. It fueled the fire of betrayal within me. I became fixated on the idea of revealing to Jessica that I was not the man she had left behind. I wanted her to see firsthand what she lost. I decided that the best way to do this was to create a social media profile dedicated to my new self. I started posting pictures of my workouts, my new wardrobe, and snippets of my life that had nothing to do with Jessica. I wanted to show her that I was thriving without her. I even made a couple of posts with the caption, "New Beginnings," and tagged a few friends. My followers grew, and it felt good to know that people were taking notice. Then came the day when I was ready to put my plan into motion. It was a Saturday, and I had heard that Jessica was going to a local bar that night with some friends. It was the same bar where I had seen her and Jake on that fateful night. I knew this was my chance. I called up Sam, my friend who had given me intel on Jake, and asked if he wanted to join me. "I think it's time I showed Jessica that I'm not the doormat she thought I was," I told him. "Let's go to that bar tonight." Sam agreed, and a part of me felt a rush of excitement. As the evening approached, I spent an extra hour getting ready. I wanted everything to be perfect. I put on a fitted black shirt that accentuated my physique, paired it with dark jeans, and finished the look off with some stylish sneakers. I looked good, and I felt even better. My hair was styled just right, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, smirking at the stranger I had become. We arrived at the bar a little after 9, and as soon as I stepped inside, I felt eyes on me. It was exhilarating. The place was packed, and I scanned the crowd until I spotted her. Jessica was at a table with friends, her laughter ringing out above the noise. But it wasn't just her. Jake was there too, leaning in close, whispering something in her ear. A wave of anger surged through me, but I pushed it down. This was about strength, not weakness. I turned my attention away from them and focused on making an entrance. Sam and I moved to the bar, ordered drinks, and then I made sure to stand tall, exuding confidence. It didn't take long for people to notice me. I struck up conversations with a few acquaintances, laughing and joking. I could feel Jessica's gaze shifting toward me, her laughter faltering as she realized who was in the room. I glanced her way and caught her staring. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment it felt as if time had stopped. She leaned over to Jake, whispering something, and I could see the tension in her body as she watched me interact with others. I had her attention, and I silently reveled in it. I knew she was wondering what had happened to the Matt she once knew, the one who would have been too broken to show his face in public. Eventually, she stood up and walked toward me, her expression a mix of confusion and anger. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, trying to keep her voice low so her friends wouldn't hear. "Just enjoying my night," I replied coolly, cradling my drink. "You know, living my best life." Her eyes flickered with irritation. "You shouldn't be here. This is my space." "Your space?" I chuckled, enjoying the moment. "I think you've forgotten that this was our space, but I'm reclaiming it." At that moment, I felt a surge of power. I was no longer the man who would take her insults and lies. I was in control, and the thrill of it sent a rush of adrenaline through my veins. "Are you still with Jake?" I asked, my voice steady. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she glanced back at him, then back at me. "It's none of your business," she snapped. "Actually, it is," I shot back. "You made it my business when you decided to cheat on me." I could see her trying to maintain her composure, but I could sense the cracks forming in her facade. "Whatever, Matt. You're just trying to get back at me," she said, crossing her arms. I smirked. "Not at all. I'm just showing you that I'm not the man you thought you could walk all over." Conversation was drawing attention, and I could see a few heads turning to watch. I noticed Sam grinning in the background, obviously enjoying the showdown. Jessica's friends started to approach, clearly sensing the tension. "What's going on?" one of them asked, looking between us. "Just a little reunion," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Nothing to worry about." I could see Jessica's frustration boiling over. "You have no right to be here. You should just go home," she said, her tone sharp. "Home? Funny, I've been living there alone for quite a while now." I'm starting to think I might like it that way, I replied, throwing her words back at her. The confrontation felt like a scene out of a movie, drama thick in the air, and I was reveling in the chaos I had stirred. I could see the regret in her eyes, the realization that the man standing before her was no longer the weak husband she could manipulate. As I turned to walk away, I heard her voice call out after me, "You're making a mistake, Matt." I stopped, glanced over my shoulder, and said, "The only mistake I made was thinking you could love me the way I loved you." With that, I walked away, leaving her standing there with her friends, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could feel Sam's approval behind me as we made our way to the bar. "I have to admit, that was epic," he said, clinking his drink against mine. "Thanks, man," I replied, feeling a sense of victory wash over me. I wasn't done with my transformation, but this was a pivotal moment. I had shown Jessica that I was no longer the man she could push around. With every step away from her, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. I still had a long way to go on my journey of revenge and self-discovery, but in that moment, I knew I was on the right path. The new me was just getting started, and I was excited for what was to come. After that confrontation at the bar, my sense of empowerment surged to new heights. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life. I had shown Jessica that I was no longer a docile husband who would sit idly by while she toyed with my emotions. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a man ready to thrive. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I dove deeper into my fitness routine, ramping up my workouts and even hiring a personal trainer to push me further. I became obsessed with sculpting my body, and every drop of sweat felt like a release from the shackles of my old life. I was on a mission to not just look better, but to feel better, inside and out. I also focused on my social life. With my renewed confidence came a desire to meet new people. I began attending local events, joining clubs, and reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in years. I surrounded myself with positive energy, soaking in the support and enthusiasm of others. It was refreshing and empowering to step outside my comfort zone. Still, the reality of the situation lingered in the background like an uninvited guest. I knew I couldn't avoid Jessica forever, especially since we shared so many mutual friends. I braced myself for the inevitable encounter, and I didn't have to wait long. A week after our last confrontation, I was invited to a birthday party for a close friend. I knew Jessica would be there, and so would Jake. As the day approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I had been preparing for this moment, hunting my new persona. I picked out a sharp navy blazer and a crisp white shirt, pairing them with stylish shoes. I wanted to look my best, and this time I was determined to show Jessica that I had moved on, that I was thriving, and that I didn't need her. The night of the party arrived, and as I walked into the lively atmosphere, I felt a rush of adrenaline. The place was packed with friends, laughter, and music. I spotted a few familiar faces, exchanged greetings, and quickly fell back into the rhythm of the night. I felt good, really good. I was joking with friends, laughing and enjoying myself. But of course, I couldn't escape the inevitable. I glanced across the room and saw Jessica, looking stunning in a fitted red dress. She was surrounded by her friends, but I noticed her eyes darting around, searching for me. When our eyes met, there was a flicker of recognition, a moment where the air felt charged between us. I could see the surprise on her face, and for a split second I reveled in it. I made my way over to the bar for a drink, keeping my demeanor casual and relaxed. It wasn't long before Jessica approached, her friends trailing behind her like a protective shield. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "You look different." "Thanks," I replied, meeting her gaze head-on. "I've been working on myself." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of realization dawning on her. "I see that. I mean, you look good. Appreciate it." I said nonchalantly, "How about you, still with Jake?" Her expression shifted, a mask of defensiveness slipping into place. "That's none of your business, Matt. You don't get to ask me that anymore." "Right," I said with a smirk. "But it is my business when you're the one who decided to throw away what we had." She flinched, and I could see the tension rising in her. Her friends exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. You need to move on, she said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. And I have, I replied, tilting my head slightly. This is what moving on looks like. You should try it sometime. I could see the set of her jaw tight. She was annoyed but also intrigued. At that moment, Jake appeared, sliding up next to Jessica and wrapping an arm around her waist. Hey, babe, who's this? He asked, eyeing me with a mix of curiosity and challenge. I could feel the energy shift. Oh, just an old friend, Jessica said, her tone defensive. A friend? Jake laughed. Doesn't look like a friend to me. I couldn't help but smile. Well, it's good to meet you, Jake. I hope you're treating Jessica well. His eyes narrowed, clearly caught off guard by my calm demeanor. Of course, man, she deserves the best. Right, I said, keeping my voice steady. The best is what everyone deserves. Jessica shot me a look, her irritation boiling just beneath the surface. This is ridiculous, she finally said, her voice rising slightly. You don't get to come into my life and act like everything is fine. I'm not acting like everything is fine, Jessica, I replied, my tone firm. I'm making a statement. I'm here to show you that I've moved on and that I'm not the same man you left behind. You need to understand that. Her expression shifted from anger to something softer, almost fearful. I could see the realization dawning on her that the old Matt was gone, replaced by someone who wouldn't be pushed around anymore. After a brief standoff, I turned back to the bar, grabbing my drink and downing it in one go. I needed a moment to breathe, to regain my composure. I could feel Jessica's gaze on me, her friends whispering among themselves. As the night wore on, I mingled more, laughing and chatting with friends. It was liberating to feel so free, and I found myself enjoying the attention. I noticed that people were drawn to my energy, and I felt like I was finally stepping into my own. Later in the evening, I overheard Jessica talking to one of her friends. I didn't think he could turn things around like that, she said quietly, almost to herself. I thought he'd be a wreck. My heart raced at her words. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. I was proving her wrong. I was not just surviving but thriving. The party eventually came to an end, and as everyone began to trickle out, I noticed Jessica lingering by the exit. She was looking at me, her expression unreadable. It was as if she was trying to reconcile the person she once knew with the man standing before her. Just before I left, I decided to approach her one last time. You know, Jess, I said, keeping my tone even. You can continue to run away from what you did, but I'm not going to let it define me. I'm moving forward, and so should you. Her eyes searched mine, a mixture of frustration and regret swirling within them. I know, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, not out of malice but out of understanding. Take care of yourself, Jessica, I said, turning on my heel and walking out into the cool night air. As I stepped outside, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't just moving on, I was stepping into a new life, one that I was excited about. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer the man who would let betrayal define him. I was reclaiming who I was, one step at a time, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take me next. The weeks following the party transformed my life in ways I never expected. I found myself thriving both personally and professionally. At work, I was more productive than ever. I took on new projects, received praise from my superiors, and even started networking more. The confidence I had gained seeped into every aspect of my life, and people began to notice. Friends and colleagues were genuinely impressed by my transformation. I continued to focus on my fitness journey, and I even signed up for a local 5K run, something I would have never considered a few months prior. I trained hard, pushing myself beyond my limits. With every mile I ran, I felt the old Matt fading further into the background. I was becoming someone new, someone who wasn't afraid to take risks and put himself out there. But as I was building this new life, Jessica was still lingering in the back of my mind. I knew I had to confront the emotional fallout of our relationship fully. I couldn't just leave it hanging, I needed closure. One Friday evening, after a long week of training and work, I decided to reach out to Jessica. It felt like the right moment to have a final conversation. I sent her a message, hoping she would be open to it. Hey Jessica, can we talk? I think it's time we cleared the air. I hit send, unsure of what would come next. To my surprise, she replied almost immediately, "Sure, where do you want to meet?" We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next afternoon. I spent the night tossing and turning, anxious about what the conversation would entail. I had worked hard to build my new self, but I knew that talking to her would stir up old emotions. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I found a quiet corner table and took a deep breath. A few minutes later, she walked in, looking a bit nervous but composed. She wore a simple blue dress that accentuated her figure, but I barely noticed. I was focused on the task ahead. "Hey," she said softly as she approached. "Hey," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. She took a seat, and for a moment we just sat in silence, sipping our drinks. I could feel tension in the air, a mix of uncertainty and unspoken words. I had hoped this conversation would bring some clarity, but I was also wary of reliving the past. "Thanks for meeting me," I finally said, breaking the silence. "Of course," she responded, her eyes meeting mine briefly before darting away. "I've been thinking a lot about everything." "Me too," I admitted. "I think we both have a lot to say." "Look, I know I messed up, Matt," she began, her voice tinged with remorse. "I was going through a lot and I didn't handle it the right way." I nodded, letting her continue. "I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for what I did to you. You didn't deserve it." "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But I need you to understand that your actions hurt me deeply." I was angry, but more than anything, I felt betrayed. She nodded, her expression softening. "I get that. I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that I do regret my choices. I took you for granted and it was wrong." "I appreciate that," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But I also want you to know that I've moved on. I've transformed myself physically and mentally. I'm in a better place now and I'm happy." Her eyes widened slightly and I could see a flicker of something, perhaps jealousy or regret. "I can see that," she said quietly. "You look great, Matt. I always knew you had it in you." "Thanks," I said, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. "But it's not just about how I look, it's about feeling strong and empowered. I'm no longer the person who would let someone walk all over him." "I can see that," she replied, her voice tinged with a mixture of admiration and sadness. I wish I had seen it sooner. A silence settled between us as we both reflected on our paths. "I hope you find happiness too, Jess," I said, breaking the quiet. "I genuinely mean that." "I hope so too," she said, her eyes glistening slightly. "This has been hard for both of us, but I'm glad we could talk." "Me too," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This conversation was what I needed to move forward completely. As we wrapped up, we exchanged a few more pleasantries, but I could sense that this was it for us. We were finally saying goodbye to a chapter that had caused so much pain. I stood up to leave, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Take care of yourself, Matt," she said softly, her eyes sincere. "You too, Jess," I replied, walking away with a sense of closure. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to fully embrace this new chapter of my life. I had spent too long entangled in the pain of my past. It was time to focus on the future. I threw myself back into my fitness regimen, training for the 5K run I had signed up for. I was determined to cross that finish line not just as a runner, but as a symbol of my transformation. The day of the race arrived and I felt the energy buzzing around me. As I stood at the starting line, surrounded by a sea of runners, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was my moment. The gun fired and we were off. With every step I took, I felt the weight of my past lifting. I was running not just to finish a race, but to celebrate the new Matt I had become. I crossed the finish line in a burst of exhilaration, my heart pounding with pride. I had done it. I had transformed myself from a heartbroken husband into a man who was ready to take on the world. As I stood there, breathing heavily and looking around at the cheering crowd, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. In that moment, I realized that I wasn't just running away from my past, I was running toward a brighter future. I was ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me. I was Matt, and I was unstoppable. Crossing that finish line wasn't just a physical achievement. It was a metaphorical milestone in my journey of rebirth. I felt an electrifying rush of triumph and liberation wash over me. The cheers of the crowd echoed in my ears, but more importantly, the sounds of my own heart beating with newfound strength drowned out every ounce of doubt I had carried for months. In that moment, I realized I had officially left the past behind. As I collected my medal, a shiny reminder of my hard work, I glanced around for familiar faces. Sam was there, grinning from ear to ear, his enthusiasm infectious. He clapped me on the back, beaming with pride. "You did it, man. I knew you could." "Thanks, Sam. This feels amazing." I replied, still buzzing with adrenaline. We celebrated with a group of friends over lunch that day, and amid laughter and camaraderie, I shared my story of transformation. I spoke of the pain, the betrayal, and how it had ignited a fire within me. I wanted everyone to understand that it was possible to rise from the ashes, to reclaim one's life after being knocked down. As days turned into weeks, I continued to invest in my new self. I joined a local running club and found a community that supported my fitness goals while also opening doors to new friendships. Each run was not just a workout. It was a reminder of my resilience, of the man I had become. But Jessica lingered in my thoughts from time to time. I had glimpsed her transformation too. She had posted on social media about going to the gym, taking up yoga, and even traveling. Part of me wanted to reach out to see how she was doing, but I reminded myself that this was my journey, not hers. I needed to focus on my own happiness. And then one day, out of the blue, I received a message from Jessica. I felt a familiar flutter of apprehension. "Hey Matt, I just wanted to check in. I've been thinking about our conversation and your transformation. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the screen, considering my response. I could feel a twinge of nostalgia creeping in, but I steeled myself. "Hey Jess, I appreciate you reaching out. I'm doing great, just focusing on my goals and enjoying life." Her reply came quickly. "That's awesome to hear. I've been working on myself too. I hope we can both find happiness." Her message felt genuine, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. We had both moved on, and perhaps this was the closure we both needed. "I wish you the best, Jess. Take care of yourself." I typed back, hitting send with a sense of finality. After that exchange, I felt a surge of freedom. The weight of the past began to dissipate completely. I was no longer tethered to the memories of our relationship. Instead, I was a man unshackled from the pain. My life was no longer defined by Jessica or the betrayal. I was forging my own path. Soon after, I began dating again. I met someone named Rachel through the running club. She was vibrant, passionate about fitness, and we shared similar interests. Our connection was effortless, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the thrill of new romance. With Rachel, I could be my true self, confident and unapologetic. As our relationship blossomed, I found joy in simple moments, whether we were running together, cooking dinner, or enjoying lazy Sundays. I realized that I had learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and self-worth through my experiences with Jessica. I cherished the bond I was building with Rachel, knowing that I was approaching this new relationship with clarity and open-heartedness. Looking back, I understood that my journey wasn't merely about revenge. It was about rediscovery. I had transformed from a man who felt broken to one who was strong, resilient, and ready to embrace life's possibilities. As I stood at the starting line of the next race, filled with excitement and anticipation, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had faced my demons, confronted my past, and emerged victorious. I was not just a survivor, I was a champion of my own life. In the end, the betrayal had catalyzed a profound transformation. I had learned that while pain can shatter us, it can also pave the way for growth. I had come to terms with the fact that life would always throw challenges my way, but I was equipped to face them head-on. I was Matt, and I was not just moving forward, I was soaring.